right? So, wow, that was amazing. That was. This side, I felt a little something, okay? I felt a little something over here. Over here, I'm going to be tasting salt in the morning because I'm crying on my pillow about that clap fest over here. Come over here, okay? Okay? Okay, how about we'll get a little blood flowing for the ladies up here, okay? This side, when I point at you, you're just going to say Z. All right, with me? This side, you're going to say brush. Just let's get some blood flowing here. Ready? Okay, that's much better, much better. All right. Yeah, I love it. That looks like Louis. Tell me that doesn't look like Louis Tucci right there. Is that Louis? That is Louis Tucci. And holy cow, I just noticed it's me and Louis. I'm like, that looks like Louis Tucci.
I want to say, thank you. My life is complete.
It'll be available in stores never. Who would want one of those? All right, so anyway, I'm sorry. The online person's like, give me my darn prize. We won there. So I don't want to keep dragging into their time. So we're going to now kick it to the ladies up here in the front. How excited are we? Ready for this? See? I knew this would work. I knew this would work. All right, so I'm going to be quiet now. I'm going to hand it off to Funko, ladies and gentlemen. Take it away.
All right, so we're Funko. We're we're a toy company up in Everett. We are a collectible company, Everett, Washington. I am the lead sculptor at Funko, Darcy Harlan.
My name is Anna, and I'm a senior sculptor at Funko.
My name is Amanda, and I'm also a senior sculptor.
And I'm Nena. I'm also a senior sculptor. All senior sculptors.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
So if you're not familiar with Funko, here's a couple of products that our company is known for. We do Pops, Dorbs,
Pint-sized heroes,
Rock candy,
plush,
Mystery minis.
a lot
action
of things.
figures
Yes.
also.
So,
Yeah, so
lots
we
of
do
products.
a lot of stuff. If you've been to a store, you've probably seen some of these things before.
And if not, welcome to the world.
Welcome to Funko World.
All right. Next.
So because of ZBrush and the capabilities that it offers, we changed kind of Funko over the years. We used to have everything traditionally hand sculpted. I was the first in-house sculptor that was brought in 4 years ago and brought in with me my knowledge of ZBrush. And so over those years, we kind of changed the look of what Funko looks like.
And we've also standardized the look, especially of Pops. You can see the previous hand sculpts and then our digital sculpts that came years later.
Of similar characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Is that it? Okay. So I'm going to start by kind of showing how we kind of start our products. Usually, we have base meshes. We have a pretty big library for almost every product we make. We have, this is the male base mesh, but we have female, child. So the size is standard. The building blocks are so that we don't make things inconsistent. We just really want to make sure that everything looks like it's supposed to be within the same world, even if it's, we want Star Wars to look like it exists in the same world as Disney, exists in the same world as DreamWorks or whatever it might be. But sometimes we have figures that take us really far away from that mold, and so we have to do a lot of custom work on it. When I did the Dark Crystal figures, I got to have a little fun. Ooh, this is the wrong. So I started with her, wrong.
I know, Windows keys.
Getting used to a PC keyboard. Yes.
Yes.
We're half PC, half Mac studio. You can choose what you want. And so it's a little complicated. And so, Mac. Yeah. Yeah, so, thank you. We are a very colorful haired company.
And I figured out how to turn off the autoplay if we want to do
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yay, so,
that. Let's just do it.
edit.
Edit.
Oh God.
Preferences.
Preferences. Full screen. Full screen. Okay. Moving and the left one. It should be turned off.
Was it
Never
someone
mind.
on Twitter? Or? Okay.
Just some
Sure.
technical difficulties.
So with her, I had to add a lot to the face. I also usually build hair in segments. Sometimes it's like this is one big chunk of stuff, but I also do little bits of pieces of things. And then once I'm kind of happy with the basic form, and actually I'll even go further with the face. So there's lots of separate pieces, which makes it easier to move things around. Because if you're just directly sculpting, it's really hard to keep those creases nice and control. Like if I just wanted to move, actually, let me do that. If I just wanted to move the eyebrows, I don't have to worry about the rest of the face deforming with it. So, and then once I'm happy with that, I commit it and I start working on the body and her creepy, gross body.
Don't judge her.
She's working it. And we even segment our hands to make it easier to pose things without having to worry about having to mask and stuff because it's already masked for us. And I just keep kind of chucking away at it or carving away at it and adding pieces, sort of refining the form so that everything's not so chunky.
You just pointed at the screen.
I did, didn't I? You can totally see me pointing at the screen. Right here, everywhere. And adding detail. And then going even further, posing. Usually the next step after I'm totally happy with the form is I start posing and adding more detail. And then, yeah. So when you're, because we were also doing action figures for this line, it really helped because I pretty much had a body that was good to go, but it wasn't as simple because pops are more simple and cartoony. So when we go to the action figures, I have to add more detail, I have to change the proportions. So I pretty much brought in the body that I had from the pop and messed with things. And since this is an action figure line, I had to keep the arms as separate pieces so that it could have joints added in.
And because she built it as separate pieces in the pop, she was able to really quickly translate that over when she was working.
If everything
on the
was
action
one
figure.
Dynamesh form, I really wouldn't be able to do that. So having things separate meant that I could really mess with proportion, push things around, and clean them up a lot easier. And then as we work along, sometimes we realize the scale's off, so I messed with the scale, added more detail, and then here she is all finished. She's so pretty. Lovely lady. And you can kind of see the same process with the other characters, just really rough block-ins, keeping things separate so that it's really easy to pose things. I like to keep the bottom and the top of the mouth separate, so if they say, hey, we want the mouth to be open, I can be like, okay, it's open. And yeah, this figure, this fun little thing. I like to, when I'm building, often clothing, it's easier to build things one-dimensional so you can really mess with them and don't have to worry about the thickness of objects because when you 3D print, the thickness is really important. You can't have things sort of crossing into one another. So I like to keep things in flat panels and then use panel loops to add that, wrong way, elevation, go backwards.
You have to
Yeah,
go back.
whoa, hey, hi, hello, beautiful.
Huh.
And usually I clean it up a bit before I do that because it needed some cleaning, but no. So there we go. See, it was already done. I don't need to do it. Why do I bother? So at this point, I like to keep my poly groups, but I usually, I wonder if I did not with that one. Sometimes I do all the detail and then I dynamesh afterwards, so I can still mess with things and move them around, and sometimes I dynamesh first. And then, like with the lace, I had to build the lace and then also fill it so that it could be 3D printed without errors. Color it up for coloring up for at Funko, we transitioned at some point. Instead of photographing physical products, which we had to wait months and months and months for the factory to get paints that we were happy with before we could photograph it, but now that we're digital, we can render everything in KeyShot and make it look pretty good right from the get-go. So.
And a good portion of our rendering team is in the audience, so thank you, render team.
Yeah. Let's see. Nope.
What's happening?
What's what?
Oh, I was just wondering what's happening.
What's happening? I've got like different projects because I'm weird.
Do you want to see if anybody has questions about
Anyway,
those?
Yeah.
So,
Anybody got questions?
questions?
Ask questions.
Oh, right here. Question from the Funko team.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Hello. I don't know if this is, oh, there it is. Hello. First of all, your hair is beautiful. Second, I do have a question, actually. When you're saying you're filling the lace or when you're filling details for printing, how do you go about doing that?
I can show you.
Ooh, Howard the Duck. Oh, no, that's not Howard.
So-
That's Darkwing Duck. Darkwing Duck.
Okay, so I used a tutorial to do this, but I kind of do it a slightly different way than the tutorial. So load up in a flat plane. There are a lot of steps, so take notes. And then load a texture. Where'd you go?
This was planned, wasn't it?
It's it wasn't planned, but I thought people would ask, so I prepared. It's not something, oh, not that. Then go into texture map. New texture, image, load that. And then you can poly paint from texture. Nope.
Oh, no.
Gotta divide. Hi, Nena. You know this. Poly paint from texture. No, that's not good enough. One more time. Okay, that's good enough for me, I guess. And then you can mask by color. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to mask. I want a poly group from poly paint. And you got this nice thing. Then I like to mask it and add edge loop mask border because if I didn't do that, if I tried to smooth it, it would smooth the edges, but if the edges are edge looped, it won't smooth them so that I won't lose that detail. Oops. Then delete, hidden, except not yet. Duplicate it because I need to make the fill layer. So delete hidden, and then usually it's with, so with him, the lace was all like wrinkled and stuff. I would wrinkle that before doing panel loops because doing it afterwards, you get mesh cutting into itself and it doesn't reprint well. But I'm not going to do that just for time, but you can sort of deform it as much as you want. And then, no. And with this one, you're going to mask that, turn that off. Unmask the whole thing so you have a solid block that's just like that. No, okay, that's why I didn't want to do that. guys can talk too.
I'm watching.
I know.
Jerks.
Question out there. Oh, way in the back. Hold on. Give me a minute. Go.
Learning something new today.
Here we go. Coming through. Watch yourself.
I do something similar, but it's a mask by color, and I'll actually go in and paint with the color instead.
And then what I'm going to do is I'm
Raise
going to
your
shrink the mask so that
Fake
it doesn't
me
cut
out.
into the geometry.
No question back there. They just wanted me to walk all the way back there.
Oh,
It was a fake out. There's one right here, though. Here you go.
Hi there. I was curious about the production time for one of these models.
It's dependent on the figure itself. We have a really quick turnover rate, so usually like a standard guy in clothes, we can actually get done in about like half a day to a day, production-wise. Something more detailed, like what Nena's working on here, could take like 3 to 4 days to work on. If we do something like a robot, like World of Warcraft or something like that.
Star Wars sometimes.
Star Wars, yeah. It could take like a week.
Here's a question from online. Do you know what type of 3D printer you guys are using to do all the prints?
A lot of the companies have their own printers.
factories.
Sorry.
So you outsource it to
Yes.
companies.
we do have a Form 2 in-house, and that's what we used for those.
Yeah. We we got that one recently, so we're really excited about it. We use it to test products. I have like an echo going on.
Oh, ooh.
Sorry.
Yeah, the in-house printer we don't use for any of our production. It's just like testing balance, just prototyping, which has been really useful. But everything else is printed, outsourced in China or Vietnam or wherever.
We have a local one as well.
And then I combine them because I want to make a brush out of them. Okay. And then, let's see, turn that off. But first, I need to,
Is your mic
no. I want to open up the edges so they can weld the brush together so that it's a smooth thing. What do I want to do with that? I'm going to do that. Trim it. And then get rid of that, mirror it so it's symmetrical. And this is really high poly, so it's going to make a really slow brush. But create insert mesh, new. Just so I have a flat surface to work on. Nope. Go into stroke. Curve mode, and mess with this. So you're going to want to weld the points, stretch if you want, and then just turn up the curve resolution so you get a nice, smooth. Be nice, don't crash. Don't crash. Don't crash.
It's too high.
Don't crash. Okay, yes. Oh, wow, I created it wrong. Yay, Nena.
Well,
It's not that difficult. It's not difficult to fix. Make sure it's oriented correctly, and then make a brush. Append. Make
And
sure.
I hope that ZBrush doesn't crash again.
Yeah, because this is like 600,000 polys. It's fine. It's fine. Keep everything.
The importance of this when making toys is we want to make sure that there's no open holes. So when they do print the product, that we don't have any issues
Yeah.
in the
If
print
it's not
stage.
filled, the factory does it, and those aren't artists, so it doesn't look very good when they do it. So it should work. It should work. It should work.
Just give it a second.
You can do it.
yay!
So, I still probably had to do a little bit more cleanup because there are some weird things building together, but otherwise,
You can
good.
kind of see what you're
Yeah.
going for.
Yeah, it's also super high poly. But yeah, so that's how you make lace in ZBrush.
Nice.
I got a question. Just carry on. Coming through the questions. Coming up. Here you go. I'm going to give you the mic, Cameron.
First, I just wanted to say it's lovely to see more women using ZBrush and non-ZBrush.
Woo!
control.
Yeah!
And it's fantastic to see more women in business. So spectacular. I was interested in how you filled that. Is it a single plane that you filled it with, or did you give that back thickness?
Oh, I gave both the lace and the fill thickness, because it won't print if it doesn't have thickness.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much.
Yep, I just made it less thin so that you get the nice detail.
Oh, Shane Olson has a question here.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi.
I'll sit down. I'm just wondering how much you guys do, how much you guys have to worry about manufacturing, like if it's going to work in a mold or not, or is that on the factory side?
A lot.
We'll actually cover that later.
Yeah,
That's part of
stay
my
tuned
conversation.
for that part of the presentation.
You guys planned it again, didn't you?
You're planned.
This is great. This is the best ever. Go ahead.
Okay, I mean, do you want to go next? Because I've got more I could show, but it's pretty much the
Let's
same
go ahead
thing.
and-
Yeah, we should probably
Okay.
go. We can come back to you. I mean,
Yeah.
that's good.
We don't have to.
Okay. Cool.
It's okay if I'm done.
We're moving on. Maybe more questions or something while I get stuff ready. Oh.
Any more
nice.
questions?
Slightly different than mine.
So Amanda's going to continue kind of going over some more stylization techniques that we use for
Yeah.
everyday pops and other products that we make at the company.
And actually, I'm going to show a little video of how I made the tauntaun. I don't know if you guys have seen our Han Solo on a tauntaun pop vinyl. Let me see if I can find it. So I actually am going to show how we go from that to that. No steps in between, just magic. So
So it just takes an arrow.
just an arrow. And I have a little video. I remade this so that you guys could see my wonderful process. It's a lot different than Nena's and a lot dirtier. So here you go. So basically, I'll just have my reference up and just look at the proportions of the tauntaun and just start moving things around, using spheres, curved tubes to create tails and horns. So I describe my job as smushing spheres around, so lots of that.
It's a kitty.
You are really fast.
Oh, thank you.
That's why.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Feel
any questions
free.
while this is running?
While this is running, pop your hand up.
It's pretty exciting. It's very cute.
There was no way to do this like a half speed.
I did turn it down, but it's really long, so yeah. I have more stuff to show also. This isn't it. Yeah, so I'll take like the fingers and I'll just remove some digits.
Kind of using that process Nena sort of touched on. We'll touch it on even more later on. But
Yeah. Lots of filling things, moving things around. Basically the same thing that Nena talked about where we keep everything separate until we're ready to Dynamesh at the ends. And that was it. So,
You got a question here on the floor. Oh, go ahead, clap.
Yeah.
I don't want to stop it. All right, here I got a question on the floor while you're getting those files.
yes.
Hi, my name is Jet. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I love that last piece first off. How long does it take for you to do something like that? You were saying could take a day, could take a week. How much time did it take to do the tauntaun?
I think it probably took about a week because there is like a rider on top of him as well. Or her, could be a female tauntaun.
So about 3 days.
Yeah, so probably about
3 days for the ride, 2 days for the pop.
yeah, probably about that, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so that video took us to here, where I have the little tauntaun built out, everything's still separate, just in little pieces. And then, shoot. Let's see here. See what I have next. And then one thing is that I had to fit this big head pop on top of the tauntaun's back. So that was a big challenge. So basically putting in a pop in a writing position as soon as I possibly could. You can see here I also posed the tauntaun a little bit, added a little detail to his horns, and we ended up having the rein in his hands. Let's see here.
A lot of what we do is problem solving. So.
Yeah, lots of problem solving. And then I didn't have any iterations of the middle of the fur. I mean, my fur process is always changing, so I've probably used a lot of Orbs crack on this guy. but yeah, remove the figure, I think. Oh, nope. Still have the figure on there just for reference. Added a little more detail to that.
Reference of placement.
Yeah, yeah, lots of reference of placements. And there's this one. And I did actually have the Han Solo built before from a previous pop. One thing that we do at Funko is that we are very open about sharing our projects and pieces with each other. This was obviously shared from myself. I do a lot of the Star Wars stuff, but it was really nice to just be able to grab that head, grab that body, and since it was still in polygroups, I was able to just pose it on there using that same sculpt. So that made it a lot easier. And then the final one, which is pretty much the same, just adding some texture to the base. And yeah, I think these keys are not, yeah. So yeah, basically just moving the proportions and everything every step of the way, obviously resizing it. And any questions about that one?
Right here at the front row.
Yeah.
Tim.
Great job.
Thank you.
Can you comment at all on your transformation from practical traditional clay to digital, such as how long it took or challenges? And do you use practical at all anymore?
So unfortunately, the traditional sculpting wasn't done in-house. All of sculpting was done out-of-house before I was hired. So we weren't really involved in that process.
I think what we noticed is that, like, when we brought in keychains and pen toppers, they noticed that if we had a digital file, we could shrink it, we could change the proportions, we could add detail or remove detail, or just, so they're like, okay, maybe we should only give the traditional sculptors stuff we're not going to reuse or need later. And then they're like, you know, do we even need traditional sculptors anymore? It takes longer. If there's like a comment from the licensor that says, hey, this body is a little bit overweight, could you make her thinner? That's a resculpt. For us, it's, you know, shrinking.
Yeah, and originally the process for the traditional sculpts were the concept artist would have to do full turns of every side view for them, whereas the concept artists for us just do one view, and we're able to kind of create the rest of it off of that, and there was a lot of back and forth between the companies.
Occasionally, like with this tauntaun, there was no concept. They just said, hey, we need a tauntaun. Could you do that? And so just doing it right in ZBrush really gave us a lot of flexibility with figuring out how it was going to work. So.
Whereas the traditional sculptors, they would have had to give them a drawing of it. So. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
I think some of us still do some traditional sculpting.
Yeah, I do. I love
but
traditional sculpting.
yeah.
So.
Question here in the
Got it.
back. Or who is it? Karen.
Really quickly, like I'm noticing you're using a lot of sort of well-known pop characters, Star Wars. How do you attain those licenses? Are they coming to you, or are you licensing these products, or licensing?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixture of both.
It's a big job. It's actually like there's a whole department for it. Sometimes they say, hey, we want to work together, and sometimes we go to them. Sometimes stores are like, everybody keeps asking for products for this license. Do you have it? Are you planning on getting it? So it comes from every direction. We just keep growing because
sometimes it comes from within, where we're like,
yeah.
wow, we have this license.
Yeah, I may have just like done a bunch of drawings and stuck them up all over my cubicle so that every single time they came to me, they would just see all the things I wanted to make.
Yeah. Anything else? No, we're good? Okay, we'll switch. Because I'm done. I was quick, yeah.
Oh, damn.
That's it. I'm done.
There's 4 of us.
Okay.
There's 4 of us.
Not expecting this.
I know.
And I'm going to leave your water here, or you want to move it over to
Well, here's a question online while you guys are switching. What has been your favorite project or figure you have worked on?
I'll go. I recently got this is mine. This is yours. We got the rights to do Kingdom Hearts, and that was a dream project for me. So very excited about that one.
Yeah, I think the Witcher project, I was really excited because I really like that game, and I'm actually going to show some stuff for that next.
Some of my favorite projects have not been announced yet, but I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so anything Star Wars. I think it was like one of my second projects at Funko was working on the Hoth Han Solo, and some of those others. So Star Wars has been like, working on that has been a dream for me.
I think it's probably a tie between Lord of the Rings and pretty much anything Jim Henson. That's kind of why I'm an artist.
Yeah.
I just love those things so much. But I mean, it's like doing fan art for a living, so you're going to work on several things you love.
Yeah, all the time we get like the next list for next month, and we're like, oh.
Yeah.
There may or may not be fights.
Yeah.
To work on projects.
We try to keep it civil, but don't take my Star Wars.
So here's another online question while Anna's getting ready. How many millions of polygons are you in a most complex project? So meaning they're asking, do you have any guidelines about limitations of form or overcome fabrication limitations, minimum thickness, and so on?
Not particularly. We do kind of have a restriction of when we need to send it out. A lot of the company or the factories that we work with for print, we do want to make sure that it's lower poly for that. But we try to keep it somewhere in like the 4 million, 8 million polygon.
Usually no more than 10.
But some people.
But some people.
Some people.
I'm looking at you in the audience.
Not pointing fingers.
So 10 across all your subtools or 10 million per subtool?
No.
Per Z tool.
Yeah, the
Per
tool.
project.
The project.
Project,
okay.
yeah.
So like this, what I have up is 6.8 million right now, which is a little higher because of the weapon.
Yeah, our poly count varies depending on what it was. Like, so for instance, Nena's lace that she had made earlier, we would have had the poly count a little bit higher so that that would retain at the size that it needs to be for print.
Yeah, and like super cartoony things, I mean, I don't even need a million sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now on to me. My segment is posing figures. Wrote that in caps. So posing, I think, is really interesting. Our process kind of surprised me when I first learned like how Darcy was posing things. It felt a little different than like what they teach at schools, which is a lot of like Transpose Master and things like that. So Nena kind of already showed a little bit in her presentation, and Amanda, of how we start with a base mesh and everything. It's like a maquette, and everything's broken up so that, you know, the upper arms, the lower arms, the upper legs, every single finger. And by having it broken up like that, it lets us just iterate on our poses and just create just no limitations really quickly. We can pose our figures, and here's some examples of just some cool poses of how we've been able to break away from our regular pop format and create some really interesting things.
The hero pooping pose?
Yeah, we call our original pops the squatty pops. They may or may not look like they need to go to the bathroom. Yeah, so first I wanted to show just kind of my process for posing. This is already kind of ahead. I basically start with the base mesh, and as Amanda put it, I mush shapes around until they kind of look great. I like to keep everything separate as much as I can, so you can kind of see my pants aren't combined right now. They're separate so that I can move the legs around really easily, and just everything's separate.
Something we didn't note on is sometimes we have already preset hands, so like our fist is already preset and pre-built, so we wouldn't have to repose a fist.
For mystery menus, sometimes we have like entire
yeah, we'll have like
Z
libraries
tools
of
full
hands,
different
like, oh, the hand's like this, boop, it's done. But basically, I build my figures, and then I'll show a little demo in a sec, but, oh, that's the finished one. Nope, I don't know where. There you go. So I can move things really easily. I actually created a poly group for the lower pan so that I could kind of use good old, nope, not you. I'm actually still used to this. So I can just separate using poly groups and just rotate it around. Not move too little. Yeah. And just clean it up as I go. Pops are really interesting because they have really, really short arms, and I'll show in a little bit later of just what problems that causes. But basically I go through and I pose it, and then basically when I'm done, and here the body's turned how I wanted it to, and it's matching the concept that we were provided, which unfortunately I think I didn't copy over. So pretend there's a concept that just looks like this. And here I'm accounting also, he's got tiny arms, which I had to lengthen, and then a huge gun, which is like, okay, he's totally gonna fall over, so I'm just using his foot to rest it on top. Yeah, and I kind of have a similar process for what I did with the doctor. These are totally not in order, so let me just go through every single thing. Yeah, and then I tend to, when I build my stuff, I won't like put wrinkles usually in the hands or the elbows and the knees. This one's a little special case, so that after I pose, I'll do that later. So, also interesting, sometimes, which is really nice, we get the opportunity to, without a concept, we just go in and we make our own poses, which is a lot of fun, because using the method that I described earlier, we can iterate on it really fast. So this is Ciri from Witcher. And similarly here, like, all the pieces are separate. I just throw, and we just use good old masking and extruding for fabrics, which is just really easily, we can build shapes on top of our bodies. And then for the pose, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, so I could take our little maquette and just really quickly build, like, what about this, or this one, or this one? And just trying to see with perspective on which was my favorite, and using some people's opinions, and I ended up going with this one. And then if I have a base and one that has already everything built, I can combine the two together and actually just kind of overlay. So I went in and I combined all my pieces based on the maquette. So all my upper arm bits together, so you could see everything, all the little pieces are combined. Then all my lower bits, upper legs, lower legs. And I can really easily go in and move around, like, because it's a polygroup, I can really easily go in and then mask by polygroup and use rotate. And basically go in, and just relatively quickly pose and match the pose. Do the same for the lower arm.
And this makes it so much easier to build things like armor where you need that symmetry until you're ready to pose. So you don't have to work on posing the armor. You can just pose the plain pop body and then add that armor afterwards.
Or you have to do multiple poses, because we sometimes do multiple figures with different poses for the same character.
Yeah. So it's really nice when we have an iteration where everything is still separate and pre-dynameshed, and let's say in the future they're like, okay, well, and this happens a lot with superheroes. Like, oh, we want a variant of Batman, like jumping off from the ground and, I don't know, shooting off some weapons. And I know about Batman.
You're thinking of
Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's what Batman does. Yeah, so this one I can actually do polygroups. So if I have the lower boot, I can then go in and just go boop, try to match. And then hands are really nice, and I haven't, again, like learning how to pose. I tried Transpose Master once, and then I said nope. And so then, like, okay, posing hands is always really intimidating, but with this, you know, you could go in and say, just good old polygroups, everything's separate. I can go in and really quickly change what the hand is doing. And it really helps to see, like, I know a lot of I know there's the gizmo tool now, which I actually kind of don't use because I'm so used to this now. But what really helped me for posing this way was thinking about it, like looking at our hands and saying, okay, well, the finger pivots from this area, so you have to make sure to pay attention where you put your pivot point as you're rotating and just kind of, oops, tweaking as you go.
We kind of call it like a maquette or a marionette type of system going on.
Yeah, so I can go in and then just do, I don't know what to do.
It's very special.
But, you know, if I go in and, okay, maybe she's gonna kick now. She's attacking someone, right? So I could go in and like, okay, kick.
Good job.
Yeah, there she goes. Oh, gotta.
And we also have the same like base meshes for the fingers and stuff for the action figures, so more realistic, posable fingers that are all separated, and rock candy and anything else.
Yeah, all of our base meshes have a very similar system set up to them.
Yeah, really important with this method to look at your model from all directions, because I just broke her leg, obviously.
She'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just a flesh wound.
There you go. Oh, I don't know what that...
Yeah, that's what we've been laughing at the whole time.
I didn't even see that, so it's not there. Just kidding. Her arm's missing a joint, but... Yeah, so I kind of, with this method, I went in and basically colored her up at the end, so she looks pretty sweet. Yeah, and to keep it moving,
Any questions out there while she's getting a new file?
I want to do this one.
Hey, you got a question while you're grabbing a file. Here you go.
Are there any special considerations when working with hard tolerances with softer materials as opposed to hard rigid materials?
You mean like plastic, different types of plastic, or like different like hard surface versus organic?
Like the vinyl in the final product?
Okay, so the plastic. Yes, it's something that we consider while we're working on things. For the most part, our bodies are the same type of plastic, so it really isn't something we consider too much. It's more of like if a character, like from Rick and Morty, has really skinny legs that we know need to support this huge head with hair. When we work with the factories, we will call out specific type of plastics that they should use. Sometimes we'll thicken legs and things if we know from past experiences that even if we used a harder material, with this, how thick the legs were. Like for instance, our old female base mesh, we had really skinny, really small feet, and we realized over time that it just didn't support the figures. And so we changed our base mesh to have thicker legs, bigger feet, to help support the figures.
We basically call it the Michael Jackson lean, is what would happen to the figure over time.
Yeah, they just...
The little ankles just could not support it. So we kind of, a lot of, on our side, we have to pay attention to the thickness of our objects and also the sharpness too. Like we don't want to be killing little children, obviously.
Everything has to be tested, and we don't want to fail testing.
A lot of our points will smooth out and soften.
Yeah. And just like exaggerating your detail and just looking at it. So can't really display this on the big screen, but basically we'll go in and we'll about screen size, make it about the size of the pop, and like, okay, what's reading, what's not reading. Let's exaggerate those details so they come through in the end.
Did that answer your question? Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Here's another question that actually relates to what you guys are talking about. Have you ever had to redesign a sculpt due to box limitations?
Yes.
Yes.
Every sculpt.
Reprint.
Yeah.
Remold.
I think Darcy might show.
I'm going to touch base on
Yeah.
kind of the mindset that we have because of box limitation. We try to catch it earlier on, but yes, we have had to tweak a design from concept into Sculpt, and then even in Sculpt where we're like, oh wait, that doesn't fit in the box. So we do have, not only do we have base mesh files, we also have digital formats of the box files so that we can try to catch that.
Yeah, so we can test it in ZBrush. We just mock up a quick
Yeah,
box.
we try to work at proportion so that when we're sending it out, we're not resizing things and then having it 3D printed, but we want to work in the final figure size while we're working.
Yeah, so that is a great thing. All of our base meshes are scaled to final size, so we don't need to think about like, oh, everything doesn't match, which is really great.
And so our box files are also sized so that when we bring our scaled figures in, they'll fit in the box.
But we are human, so we've made mistakes.
Yeah, we've actually had to redo some things in the past, like re-output a head, for example, because like, oops, too big.
We even had a hand sculpt that didn't fit in the box, which was...
Yeah, it was impressive. Anyways, for this guy, this is Ramsay. I wanted to point out, so pops have very, very large heads, which really limits poses, especially including like when you need to fit, when something needs to clear underneath that head. There's
You can't
not a
do
lot of room.
this with your figure.
Yeah, so if I'm to take this arm right now and rotate it, it like barely clears the head, not even. So this presents issues when we want to like do a pose like this, where, okay, well maybe this isn't exactly how a human holds a bow. I mean, it sort of gets the idea where, okay, his head needs to clear the bow right here, and his arms need to pass. They need to clear his head. So we definitely make little cheats, and we will lengthen the arms. So if I was to take these arms and to extend them down, he has gorilla arms. He's a little scary right now, but you know, in the final product, when it's small, it kind of reads still pretty well. So we have to do a lot of problem solving right now, and just in a comparison with like the actual start of the hands, they're a little long.
Same with the legs. We'll have to do that a lot, where we stretch the legs if it's like a leaping pose or a
I think as long as the thing reads
believably,
it works. And yeah, here's his finished piece. Yeah, and then lastly, I wanted to show. This is getting away from our pop a little bit. Actually, the rock candies, which I think is one of my favorite formats at Funko. They're really cute.
So cute.
Basically, I will pose these a little bit differently. If the pose is really complicated, I'll actually split the limbs, but it does start like this. This is our base mesh, and if I go into and look at the polygroups, like everything is kind of split. So like, for example, the body has 3 polygroups on it, and that lets me pretty easily, so if I can smooth, so if I want to like rotate or just put leans. So I can quickly go in and kind of mess with it. So yeah, so with the Daenerys, whoops, should have restarted. Oh, yeah, so this one, very similar method. I do as much as I can with symmetry on, just because it's helpful. It's just too much work to pose and then to build the fabric and clothes over it if I don't need to. Like the belt, for example, would have been a little difficult if she was posed already. I could just go in. And then basically, I will go in and I pose. And so just as I showed in the beginning, I can actually, with my polygroups, just really quickly move around the limbs. And the rock candy poses aren't that crazy, so this is a pretty good method. Like with the hands, you can kind of see, I just masked it and blended my mask and then bent it. And then the hands were moved. The hand base mesh is very similar to the pop, so we just kind of move it around really quickly. And this hand was already done, so I just borrowed it from another figure. And then I also...
the other figure's getting it back, though. I don't think the other figure's getting it back, though. Not really borrowed.
Yep. And then I also, something that I use a lot is Transpose Stretch, and it just kind of, I think someone showed me how to do it, and because I couldn't find it in any tutorials. It's really useful. Basically, the Move tool has a different, just way it acts. And I like to use it on my boots, for example. So this boot, you can kind of see this is pre-cleanup. I moved it because I wanted to match with the angle of the foot a little closer because the base mesh foot was just straight on. Oop, not this one. Just the angle wasn't matching. So what I do is I could go in and actually like, okay, well, the foot normally might bend around here. Oops. And for the Transpose tool, so normal behavior is if I was to move this, it kind of moves it like this. So it just kind of iterates. But if I'm holding, not Control, if I'm holding Alt, it starts to act a little bit differently. So it is as if it's looking at the geometry around the little circle, and it'll try to move it kind of in that generic area. So if I put my wheel right here and I hold Alt and move it, it'll only move the top part. So same with the middle. If I hold it, it'll only kind of tweak the middle. So it's nice to, with the combination of normal transpose, to like, okay, well, her leg maybe is over here, and now the angle's a little skewed. I'll hold Alt with my rotate. It'll just affect the top of my boot so I can angle it really quickly. So it's really useful. Yeah, so with her I went in and basically same processes that I'm talking about. Pose it, Dynamesh it, clean it up. We will leave our hands usually, we don't Dynamesh our arms usually to the body because we have to account for the fact that the factory will probably have to split it there. So we want to make sure to keep those bits separate. And same with pops, it just makes it easier if we want to do an arm swap, for example. Like it's the same figure, but he's holding two different things. So they might release two different figures instead of one, and it's cheaper to reuse most of the mold. So they can do just an arm swap, for example. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all of my thing.
Okay.
Okay, we'll ask questions while you guys are transitioning. Go ahead, clap.
That's okay.
Guys, we got to get better at this clapping thing. Yeah. There's like one person, and then everyone goes,
Your texture
oh, we're
thing.
clapping. Right. Question.
Hey guys, quick question about the post-production of the factory. So they're doing all the keys and slots there?
No. Some of the keys will actually, we have an output team, and they will do a lot of our cutting for us before we send it to the factories as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes the factories have their own way they do it, so they'll make their own on top of the keys that we've given them, but if we separate it out, they just get a better mold overall. Because if they're cutting into it, they have to re-sculpt whatever they cut.
Yeah, I think it's good practice to, while you're sculpting, have the process in your head of like, okay, well, I need to have these pieces separately this way because I know they're going to have to split it because of an overhang. So we include a lot of that process while we're sculpting, and then our outputters will add keys on top of cuts, and then the factory might tweak things on their ends because they know better how to mold things.
Right, another question right here before Darcy goes.
Amazing work. Just wanted to ask you, do you always get references from clients for the character you're doing, or is it up to you guys to do how it looks?
So we do usually get references from the licensor that we're working with.
If it's current or future.
Yeah, if it's something like the Dark Crystal, I don't think that you, or did
We
you?
were
Oh, never
able to
mind.
request assets from them, but I would also go to screenshot websites because sometimes their reference would be like front and back, but I'd need like a side view that in a weird area or to see their shoes or whatever. And then sometimes they don't really have anything, and we have to just scour the internet for whatever we need.
They definitely do have requests, though. So we do work with the licensors to make sure that it's a figure that they want also.
I'll actually touch a little bit on that on my project.
Yeah,
as well.
good segue.
Thanks.
Before you go, Darcy, April Newton wanted to say a shout out. She's saying her kiddos, as in children, kids, are loving the Funko Pop presentation. These girls are rocking it.
Oh,
They
thank
just
you.
wanted to-
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to touch base on making a physical product, so something that you actually are going to hold in your hand. Oh, good point. So I'm going to do Shenron, the dragon. He was a 6-inch figure. This is done by our amazing rendering team. Thank you, rendering team. So starting in on a project, we will get concepts. This is a very rough concept that was given to us because a lot of times we will fix like a general idea in Sculpt, especially on these weird ones. And so you can see on the far left, your guys' left, my right, there's the concept that was drawn and kind of how we wanted to fit it in the box. I went looking online to kind of see what other figures have previously existed for this figure, and then also just some reference. And things I was noticing on all of the figures were that it has supports. So every figure was coming with these struts that were holding it up. And I knew from past experience with projects that we were not going to do that. So this figure had to be self-supporting. So going into the project. So what I did first was I brought in a box file, and I kind of just kept the two sides of it up, and then started blocking in the pose, and then a very rough base, and then having the Dragon Balls in there as well, for those who aren't familiar with Dragon Ball Z. I'm going to use this instead. I wanted to keep, I'm like failing with this. Sorry, bear with me.
What do you need? Are you okay?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
you
sorry. Hold up. I totally forgot.
Restore standard.
Oops. There we go.
Thank you. I use the basic UI because I'm so familiar with it over the years. So thank you.
Here you go. Back to normal. I know.
So I started off building it in separate pieces because I knew that I wanted to consider when we mold it that it's going to have to be broken apart. There's no way they're going to be able to mold something wrapped around itself like this. Also, I was messing around with having a support structure with having kind of 3 posts, one here, and then one in the center. And then in the center having it support itself here, and then there, where it's touching kind of itself. It was very roughly blocked in, but I wanted to start with the body because I was concerned most about the self-supporting issue. After I got it to a point where I was sort of happy with it, you can kind of see I played around with thickness of it between the first stage and the second stage, but I started blocking in the head, kind of following the same process as what Anna and Nena mentioned and Amanda mentioned, where, all my pieces are separate so that I can move things around, that I can really quickly go in if I wanted to tweak the eyebrows and make him more angry. I could go in really quickly and adjust that. If I wanted his mouth open, kind of like Nena mentioned, I kept the bottom jaw as a separate piece. I have the teeth actually attached to the bottom jaw. I could go in and really easily swap that. As you can see, I didn't care about the placement. At this point in time, I was just going in and blocking in the head. I would have the body hidden while I was working on that. Following after getting a head to a good point, I went in and added more detail to it and then tweaked the body even further because, again, I was not quite settled on how I wanted it to look. It was closer to what I wanted, but I was still messing around with it. I wanted to take the thickness bigger with the head having been kind of settled on. and started blocking in a little bit more details of how I wanted to stylize this dragon. Going from there, I tweaked the body even further, still just wanting to make this wrap nicely. I ended up pulling more of the torso forward here, just to get a little bit more of this silhouette. It's very overlapping in itself, so I wanted to try to make it as unique as I could with the restrictions that I have. At this point in time, I moved the support there, and then still keeping the one here, and then the self-support in the center. Adding in the arms, following again kind of that same process of just keeping everything separate. For me, I like having the muscles when I add them in all kind of just meshed in, is like I insert a sphere and just throw it in. Brought on our base mesh hands, kind of took away a finger, added some claws on, so added that. You guys can see I started adding a poly paint of just kind of showing where that center stripe would be, for knowing that the figure kind of has a different chest than the rest of the scales, which I would go in and work in the next stage. You guys can see here and here, going back to Paul's comments about the box, I outgrew the box. So we decided that we would take it smaller in there. It would still technically fit at this point in time. Like if I move the box up, you guys can see that it does still technically fit, but he's really tight in that box, and so we have to consider blister and packaging. So we decided that we wanted to take it a little bit smaller. When I say we, I was constantly working with my concept artist and wanted to make sure that his input was being had while I was working on this project. Again, I sculpted in the face really early on because I wanted to just kind of nail down what the stylized look I wanted going forward. So as I got that done, I was working on finishing and cleaning up the body. I pre-painted this so I knew kind of where this detail was going to line up in, so that when I went in to do the detail, I kind of already had it planned out. I think it's in here. And then you guys can see I kept all these segments still parted, with the consideration of mold that was going to happen later on. I went in and added the detail on the body to match the head, so that it carries all the way through, going all the way down to the arms, and then getting a little bit narrower and smaller as it like tapers off at the hands. Still retaining these segments so that they're separate. And when I had planned them out, I did want to keep them kind of in big shapes, so this one here, where it doesn't have too much movement in it, but has kind of one solid shape so that they could cast a mold of that. This one I knew we were going to eventually have to cut, but I wasn't quite sure how I wanted it to look, so I left that one alone. Same with this one. Following up, I colored the figure up. For this licenser, we actually have to do colored turns for submission purposes. So that was part of the reason why I colored this one up. How am I doing on time? Sorry. By this point, I was pretty happy with the shape and everything and the style of how it looked. I went back in and did the final details of just adding the scales on the back, or the scales. Drawing my like on the word. Sorry.
Is
and
back
then
scales?
These?
Oh, spines?
Spines.
I don't know. Whatever. Oh, crests.
Those things.
Nena says crests.
Crests.
I don't know.
And then fixed up the base to kind of just give it something more unique than just a flat cylinder base. Which unfortunately we couldn't do any like explosions or bursting out of the ground because of the self-sustaining. It had to kind of be restricted, or I would basically cover up the Dragon Balls. So we went for something like this. By this point, I would submit it to the licensor, and they came back and wanted the head shape changed. So just to show, they wanted it smaller, they wanted the scales changed only on the head. So I adjusted it on the head in itself, and to do something like that, what we do is I took that initial head mesh, brought it in, and started tweaking it. Even from here, they pushed it a little bit further than what I had. I wanted it very boxy. So I was able to take the shape of the snout and pull it in, box off my shape here, because I had this already pre-saved as a version where I could really easily take these traits and quickly change them up. As well as, oh, I don't have it saved here. The fins?
Sure.
The side fins I had kept separate, so I was able to quickly change those shapes up too.
So, Darcy, a question from online.
Yeah.
For the scales, did you do it one by one? Did you make a brush?
I did do them one by one. I guess part of the love of the traditional sculpting, I actually really enjoy that aspect of just like going through and actually doing it. There's something soothing about it, so I did paint them all on. I have a brush that I brought with.
I would have not done them one by one.
I know.
I have used nanomesh for scales, but they weren't as like stacked like bricks. It was more feathers, so it could be a little more randomized. But for a pattern like that, it's a bit easier to control it if you're doing it one by one.
So I made an alpha, and then I brought it in to ZBrush and painted them on. I started at the bottom and just worked my way up. I could show that, I guess. That would be the nice thing to do. No. For this, I usually like using the standard brush when I bring it in. I found that over time, that brush moves around surface the nicest. Usually when I'm painting, so when I'm poly painting, I'll use a combination of the standard brush and then the clay brush, the clay build-up brush. I liked how Lazy Mouse works with that the best. But yeah, so I would go in here. And this also really helps for having it being segmented, because if I wanted to, I could break this off and not have all of this information to have to worry about. This is going to be really intense.
You want to do insert?
No, I would use it as and it's not reacting the same way I had it happen. But I'd basically go in and paint it on, and I'd probably mess with my tools. This is a really old project that I've done, but I would go in and I'd paint it on.
Oh, color-wise? Do you want RGB on?
No.
Just kidding.
It was like this. I probably had the poly count or the divisions up too. It's not working how I want it to, obviously, for a presentation. Anyway, so I would go in and I would paint all of them on and just kind of build my way up as I was wrapping around.
And even though she's doing that one by one, she's still super fast. I don't get it.
Yeah, this probably took about 3 days to make, and it was more so because I kept futzing with the body. I just wasn't really happy with how it looked constantly, that I just, like this iteration was a couple in. Just lots of iterations of just trying to figure out how I wanted to get it to support itself, and then I finally decided that it was going to rest on these Dragon Balls and then have the center actually touching the ground, with it considerations of the box requirements and then molding considerations, because the factory actually has to be able to take this and mold it, and we did split it, I think, here as well as it splits here.
Yeah, you hit the cuts pretty well.
Yeah, that was something nice. I worked with the output team, and they are amazing. That when I went to them, I was like, hey, so this is going to be not the best project to have to output, because it needs to kind of follow these scales and break. I tried to keep it as much as possible where the scales I wanted to stay were overlapping, and worked with them to make sure that we could get those cuts here. You can see I had mine going into it because I wanted to leave extra mass that they could play with or cut if they needed to in the output, so that it kind of overlapped here. But we wanted to follow this, so when we did get the mold in and when the factory was working with it, it would be as clean as possible. Unfortunately, there would definitely be a seam, but as long as the seam would be...
It was kind of organic. It wasn't just a straight cut through, so that was nice.
And some of our awesome output team is here too, so please give them a hand also, because they're amazing.
But yeah, this isn't something that we only consider for, oh, I didn't bring her, figures, or just the really weird figures, even some like the dragon. I knew that the mouth was going to be separate because it was open, so I kind of already sculpted in a seam that I wanted them to follow when they broke it off. I didn't actually make this one a separate piece. This was one of my earlier projects, so for Shenron, his mouth actually is separate, and it's kind of following that line, because I knew by this point, this was my first time working with an open mouth dragon, so I actually sculpted this as one piece. Unfortunately, the factory had to kind of help me out in that regard of just taking, there's subtool, or there's a whole bunch of subtools in there, but they're all, I polygrouped them together. But I did sculpt in this with the intention where that would be where I'd want my seam, and worked with the factory to make sure that that seam was there. And then by the time I got to Shenron, I already knew that I wanted to do that. So when we went to output, we could have that seam already there for them to work with. Yeah. Other box issues. So for instance, did we bring the box files? Okay. The alien queen, she's literally the size of the box. I have it in here, cool. To kind of showcase this. So I brought the box file in to work with. I knew I wanted her to be as big as possible. We had already previously made, or I had previously made the alien from the first set. This is our mystery miniseries, the sci-fi mystery miniseries. And so I made him in the first set, and I knew that I wanted the alien queen to be grander than him, but our box size kind of restricted how big she could get, because she had to fit in that box. So in comparison to each other, I wanted her to feel grander than him, even though she was roughly about the same size as he is. And so having the box files has helped a lot with that, but we also have to kind of keep in consideration when we're molding or creating these figures that they have to fit in the box that we have, so. And also kind of storing our library of things that they mentioned earlier. We were able to, when I went to start working on her, I was able to start stealing pieces from him initially that I could see if I could reuse it all on her, which weren't many. I think I started off with his legs, and that was about it.
Yep. And then I stole this figure to make the reaction figure, which then I stole it for myself to make the pop.
Yeah, we do that a whole bunch, borrowing pieces from each other. Another thing that we have to consider for, not in mold consideration, but factory consideration. Recently I got to work on Tron Sora, for those who are familiar with the game. And when I was working on him, we have had Tron figures in the past that we did, and we usually keep them pretty smooth and not having a lot of surface detail. We would do it all in paint, so you can see I went in and I pad printed it all, or painted on to mock up where a pad print would be. Just to show a comparison. And then we found out what factory we were working with and decided that this would actually be very difficult to pad print to get that all wrapped around the figure. And our factory is actually capable of doing really clean and nice prints or paints. And so we ended up taking that surface detail I painted and raising it so that it was all sculpted in instead, so that they would have kind of something that they could match and follow to paint. Rather than trying to get these to wrap and sit nicely, the factory would struggle very hard to accomplish that, even with me mocking it up so that they can kind of see a comparison. This would be a lot nicer and kind of provide that they will actually be in the correct placement. How I did that was I kept these very kind of contained in colors so that when I went into the leg, I could just mask by color and pull out. I should probably do that.
Is everything done in-house, or do you guys work with contractors outside of Funko for sculpting?
I'd say about 99% is done in-house. We've recently had a contractor that we've worked with for some action figures, but that's just because they want a lot of figures very, very fast, and sometimes there's just not enough manpower to do it all. But we do almost everything in-house.
And the hiring door is currently open.
There you go.
We're hiring.
And so everyone knows, where are you located, so everyone knows?
Everett, Washington.
It's about a half hour north of Seattle.
There you go. Beautiful. There's a question from Tim. Darcy?
Mm-hmm.
What is the turnaround time from digital completion until on the shelf?
It depends the product. Sometimes we'll rush things, but for the most part, it's 6 months.
6 months. Mm-hmm. It's about 4 months for sculpted, approved, sent to factory, and factories completes it. It's about 4 months, and then they put it on a boat. So we call it boat date is our date that the product has to be on the boat, and it takes about 2 months overseas to get distributed and so on and so forth. It's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's fast. I think traditional turnaround time is 9 months, but we've worked with our factories to get it down to 6. But
that's how we're able to. There's definitely been examples of everyone went to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and at the end, spoilers, probably know, there's the little dancing Groot in the pot, and the next day our boss was like, that has to be a thing, let's make it. So it took about 1 day. Nena,
with gifts about the size of a post-it stamp, because
with
we didn't have
pirated
reference.
images from the movie, we used that reference to make the figure, and it was, I think, the first on-shelf product of that kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because licensors don't always reveal like their secrets. They keep it hidden until the very end, and that's the only way that we're able to make things, is just to watch it.
Yeah, same like recently there's the Game of Thrones dragon.
Game of Thrones, that was really fast.
Yes, that we turned around time. The product itself hasn't actually happened, but we were able to announce it now right away with our rendering team.
I think that's also the beauty of Keyshot, is we're able to realize it very fast and release it, and people are like, wow, too soon.
Spoilers.
No spoilers, though.
Yeah. And then going from there further, even after we made these decisions to add this sculpted on instead, the licensor comes back and we have to make changes. Is this my final one? Yeah, changes that they want as well. So there's a lot of iterations that we make just within the factory because of things that we have to consider. Factory, mold, licensor, as well as just aesthetic things that we try to include every now and again because we're all fans of a lot of what we work on. Yeah. Any questions?
Ray, we got one. Oh, water just fell.
When you get a new licensing, do they ever tell you we just need 3 variants? They let you choose which form to use, or do they always tell you what kind of variant?
I think Anna touched on this earlier about a lot of the time it's more the companies so like the Barnes & Noble's Hot Topic will ask for variants on things, or sales department will figure out or exclusives that we want, or variants that we want. I think every now and again we'll get licensors that go, we want to make sure that we do this variant. Sometimes they'll work with the companies and they'll kind of tie that in together rather than just us working with the companies.
Yeah, like if we're pitching something, they'll usually say, have a few options for variants we could make just in case. And then if a store wants it, they'll be like, oh, I want that.
Yeah.
All right, question in the back. Come in.
Sometimes we're so excited that we're like, no, we want this. Please make it.
All right, here you go. Question way in the back.
Yeah.
Way back here.
Hi there. Great work. How many full-time sculptors does Funko have?
We have 18.
So
I like that you guys all looked at me.
you guys typically bang out sculptures in like 3 days. You guys have, do you guys serve other roles, or you're always on projects or working on projects individually?
It depends what your position is. So for instance, I don't sculpt the majority of my day because I'm running
Meetings.
the team. Yeah. We do have other things at the department that we do, but for the most part, the sculpting team, we try to get them to be sculpting the majority of the day. That's what we enjoy doing. So
I think I'm the one weird unicorn that's also a concept artist. So
Yes.
I'll do concepts and do sculpts, but most people just sculpt.
Yep. Sometimes we'll have like revisions. Will take just as long, if not longer, than the pop itself took the first time. So sometimes we're backtracking a little bit, but for the most part, we're sculpting new stuff.
Sometimes you'll spend a ton of time like sculpting some fur, and then they'll come back and be like, actually, we want all that fur just a little bit smaller. So you just
15% smaller.
15%.
How is it 15%?
Just use your fur brush, or your fur smaller brush.
Yeah. More questions.
Make it smaller button.
Question here from Cesar.
I love that you guys are doing horror stuff. And I grew up on horror, so the fact that you guys are branching out there, that there's something for me to collect. Is that, are you guys, is there like a big plan to push more towards that sort of stuff? Or?
We kind of touch base on a lot of fields.
Our goal is to expand in every direction.
Yeah.
So.
Dominate the world.
If people like it, we'll make it.
Yeah, I think it's really nice. I mean, we have our projects that kind of, the big movie releases like Star Wars, Marvel, Disney. But the really nice thing is we totally don't shy away from old, like niche stuff that are very obscure audiences. And it's really nice that we're able to make product for really weird things that there's that one guy who's like, yes! They made something, that was my dream, I've waited my whole life for this, and everyone else is like, I don't know what that is, but it's really nice, I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question for portfolio.
Oh.
For inspiring Funko sculptors, what piece of advice would you give to make their portfolios pop?
I would not put pops in your portfolio. Don't do it. It doesn't work out in the favor.
It's very,
we know what they're
very
supposed
obvious.
to look like.
Yeah.
So if you make a mistake, we see it immediately. So, have a unique voice, express yourself and your interests, and
Usually we like a
We'll
good
cheat
amount
you.
of sculpts in your portfolio too, because it showcases kind of your skill set as a sculptor, the more pieces that you have. If you do something stylized and realistic, doing a combination is great. I think we kind of tend to lean a little bit more towards the stylized.
Yeah. We need to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if
Because
you're
it's a lot of what we work in.
Yeah, if your portfolio is all realism, I mean, you might be a fantastic sculptor, but it might not be something that we're looking for. So definitely stylize stuff.
Okay. Any questions here? Just time, so you know you get about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to move on to something else.
I don't know. We could show some more stuff to wrap it up.
Oh yeah, I wanted actually, if you want to pull up my Tauntaun Dorbs, I totally was
Oh.
really nervous and didn't show that, but I
I know, I
also
thought you were-
in my folder here. Do you want me to?
Now you're good. Okay.
There you go. Here.
Go ahead. You guys started 5 minutes late.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of show how I actually took that Tauntaun pop and turned it into a Dorbs also. The Dorbs is very simplified, and it has just like these little happy eyes. They're very, very cute. So yeah, I just took, basically just took that Dorbs head, took the pop body and just kind of smushed it around until it fit more of that form factor. So, and then I ended up using just like curved tubes for these little fur bits because it didn't really have the more detailed fur that I would have done on the pop. And then you can kind of see for a lot of the really stylized things. Oh God, this is a Windows keyboard. It's fine.
The skin shade 4 on.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, for that, we just add these little score lines just to show the very, very simplified fur, these little happy eyes. But I was just able to take those pieces that I had already created and turn it into another form factor very, very easily.
Yeah, and something that we have to consider a lot is the size of the figures. So like the Dorbs figures are actually smaller than the pop ride. So simplifying the amount of detail down as you're bringing it down to that smaller form factor.
Oh, crap.
Whereas like the Shenron figure was big, so I was able to sculpt in a lot more detail. Even though it's really stylized, simplified detail. And then her original Tauntaun was a lot more detailed.
Yeah, so that's kind of the difference of size and just basically stylization, taking those pieces that I already did. And very, very quickly, I think maybe 4 hours or so just to make this Tauntaun Dorbs with the Han Solo. So, yeah.
Can you guys discuss what your next projects are? Somebody wants
No.
to.
No. We can't.
There you go, online. No.
But we're very excited. Yes.
Yes.
All the time.
Constant.
Another question from Tim, and then I'll come back there, Cameron.
You mentioned you do a lot of niche or one-off or smaller volume projects. Do you have a target of how many you would need to sell or that you would be okay to return on investment in return?
Is it like 10,000?
I don't know what the minimum is. Our sales department knows that.
I do know that I think because they're very
water?
successful on the big famous movies and so on and so forth, we are able to lose maybe a little bit of money on something that's not as popular. Just we're able to do that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's what the companies are really about, is there's that charm factor that we, as a company, were able to do that before because we have so many licenses that we don't want to lose it as we continue on to just those bigger licenses.
Question way back here.
It seems like your production process, I don't know how long Funko has been around, but the production process seems really well defined in terms of development of character right through production and delivery of that product. How long did it take you to really fine-tune that to the point where you were satisfied with the product you're getting?
We're still working on that.
I think I can kind of answer that one. So at the beginning, we had the slide with the hand-sculpted things and our new and current product. I think at one point, I was like, why do they all look different? I don't get it. Because every artist kind of would put their own flair on the pops, for example. And then I thought, it was like, well, we probably should, standardize it so it all looks the same. So I think once we kind of had a base mesh solidified, which also has gone through a few iterations over the years, but I think it's really started, like a good process started from then.
And that's only been about 3 years now since we've had the base mesh?
It's only about 3 years.
Yeah.
Our team grew from 3 people to 18 in about 4 years.
It went from 3 to 18 in about 2, because we
About
had
2
it
years.
we had it at 6 for a while.
Yeah.
So
we're still hiring.
Yeah.
They're still hiring. Any other questions here? Long pause.
I think we're good, right?
All right, you guys are done?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Funko, everybody.
Yeah.